Hi, my name is Al Sang. I'm the CTO of StrongLoop, and today I'm going to be talking to you about full-stack JavaScript development for mobile with BACN. To set the context of our discussion, let's visit some background information here for the enterprise. For the enterprise, there's a bunch of challenges right now, especially in the mobile business. Enterprises needed their mobile strategy yesterday, and they continually need to iterate quickly on this mobile strategy. So not only are they behind, but they continually need to evolve the strategy, and they're already having problems getting a stranglehold on these things. And increasingly, there's multiple devices that need support. So you have your tablet, you have your iPhone, you have your browser, and you need to release features and functions concurrently across all these devices, or what we call multi-channel. There's also an army of web developers that they've invested in right now. And they're trying to bridge the gap between mobile and what they currently have as web developers. And they can't hire enough mobile developers being native mobile developers. On top of that, there's some interesting what I call disruptors that are going on. There's HTML5 that continually evolves and improves. You have features like geolocation, web storage, event source, and other APIs that are helping meet the mobile use case. And increasingly, businesses are finding that there's this trade-off between an optimal UX that you would normally get through on a mobile device through native versus being something in between, a mobile web app versus a hybrid app. And we'll talk more about that. And as technology continually evolves, there's new and emerging development frameworks to address these things. Back in November 2012, Gartner made an interesting prediction, and they said by 2015, for consumer mobile being, you can think of those as the gaming apps, the apps that require a rich interface for B2C-like applications, that there will be this shift, and that right now, native and hybrid or mobile web are sort of neck and neck. Interestingly enough, though, enterprise will be biased and cross over the line toward being more hybrid, and we'll see why. Native versus hybrid versus mobile. So let's take a look at this quadrant. You have your native apps. They're developed on these highly proprietary platforms. They take full advantage of the device's hardware capabilities. Very advanced UI interaction, very smooth. It is by far the fastest performance. They're limited to the App Store distribution. So you're on this single platform, and keep in mind that enterprises are faced with supporting these on multiple platforms. You have the full capabilities of the device at hand because you're developing natively. On the other side of the spectrum, as far as capabilities, you have sort of the emerging standard for HTML5 in the context for mobile. And what it promises is that HTML5 being a standard, being supported by mobile web browsers, you're able to leverage potentially web developer skills with technologies that they're already familiar with, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Because it's served up server-side, you have instant updates, and you're not restricted by distribution like through the App Store. But why not have the best of both worlds, which is if I didn't have to support multiple platforms, I could develop it once but take advantage of the platform's native capabilities. What would that end up being? That would end up being a hybrid mobile web app. So leverage your web developer skills, access to the native development platform via JavaScript APIs, not the APIs that are proprietary to the device platform itself, and also be subject to App Store distribution. But have that full packaging. So the question becomes, okay, if there's this trend going on, how can the enterprise develop hybrid mobile web apps to meet the demands of their markets and their users? And the answer at StrongLoop that we've determined is that it's full stack JavaScript development for hybrid mobile web apps. So what exactly is full stack JavaScript? Well, let's look at what a typical enterprise web stack is. On your front end being on the browser, you have HTML, CSS, and JS all being served up server side, server rendered, and it's displayed in the browser. The business logic or the middleware is being developed in something like Java, C++, Python, or Ruby. On top of that, the data that is actually being manipulated through middleware comes from something like an RDBMS. And if you notice in this scenario, you have sort of three developers, types of developers that is. You have a front-end developer who understands HTML, CSS, but they have no clue as to what's going on the business logic on the back end. You have the back-end person who doesn't have a good understanding of what the view and the interaction is, but is tasked with developing all of the core functionality for the back-end heavy lifting of logic. And then you have someone like a DBA who maintains the data persisted yet in another form, in this case, tables and rows. So full stack JavaScript, what is it? Imagine JavaScript everywhere, and that's basically what it is. So not confined to a browser anymore, but multiple devices. You have phone, tablet, and they're all developed in the paradigm of what we call single-page apps. And we'll go more into what single-page apps are powered by. These single-page apps are self-inclusive. They have the logic, the routing, the MVC framework, so to speak, on the browser. And it's calling back to a JSON REST API. So again, JavaScript being in the form of JSON. Now, what if you could extend that same language that you've been using on the front end, defining all the front end logic, and also define that back end logic with JavaScript? Well, that's what server-side JavaScript is, which is effectively Node. This bridges the gap between these two. And furthermore, what if the data payload itself was nothing more than JSON stored in its native form in some sort of JSON document DB like Mongo or CouchDB? And if you notice here, you have one developer now versus three types of developers that you have to cross the chasm where it's very easy to have things fall off, drop by the cracks. So to recap, the advantages of full stack JS development is that 1 + 1 + 1 is 1. A single developer from front end to back end. You have a single dynamic scripting language that's very powerful, that's somewhat ubiquitously known. A single object model that's expressed in its native lingua franca, or JSON. And a single API that's being surfaced to multiple clients, regardless of device, form factor, so on and so forth. At this point, I want to introduce BACN. So what is BACN? Well, BACN is StrongLoop's solution to full stack Java development. BACN originated as Bootstrap, Cordova, Angular, and Node, thus the acronym. But BACN really has become a full stack JavaScript ideal comprised of these components: a UE framework, a JavaScript-based client MVC that runs entirely in the browser, and a native device bridge to give you access to the native APIs and functionality on the device itself. All three of these things fused together form the basis of tackling how do we most efficiently develop a hybrid mobile app. All of this being powered by a Node.js backend. So let's walk through how BACN works conceptually. As most of you know, most of mobile app development starts with the user experience. And what we've fused together in this example is Bootstrap to be used in developing the UI and the styling, your typical CSS, HTML, so on and so forth. We've harnessed the power of Angular as a client MVC to contain the app logic of what's going on and also to data bind back to that REST API that we showed. Finally, to make this hybrid, having access to the native device functionality itself through something like Cordova or PhoneGap. And the glue that takes this all from the existing data services, we've developed a solution called LoopBack, which is based on Node. As part of our StrongLoop offering, we also have StrongOps that helps you monitor the solution, and StrongNode, which are the fundamental building blocks that allow you to extend this functionality. So we firmly believe that full stack JavaScript development will be the way of the future to meet this prediction by Gartner. And in reality, BACN actually has many permutations and implementations. And here are some examples of other frameworks that could be substituted in each one of these components. In closing, to learn more, check out our blogs and products. Our BACN blog that goes more into depth as to the reasoning and rationale behind BACN, and describes the particulars of the criteria that we use for unopinionated versus opinionated client MVCs. For example, Angular versus Backbone.js. Full stack JavaScript development for mobile, a first part of 4 series that's already been released. And LoopBack, of our full stack JavaScript framework for mobile that started in the back end that is now being evolved into the front end. Thanks.